Many people believe that spiritual discernment is something dramatic. They imagine visions, voices, instant certainty. But real discernment rarely announces itself. It does not shout. It does not demand attention. It does not try to prove anything. Discernment is quiet. It often shows up as a pause, a hesitation, a subtle inner signal that something is not aligned. Most people miss it because they are looking for something louder. But in Scripture, God rarely speaks through noise. He speaks through awareness. Discernment is not the ability to judge others. It is the ability to recognize truth before it becomes obvious. It is not about suspicion. It is about sensitivity. And not everyone has it. Not because God withholds it, but because discernment requires stillness, humility, and a willingness to listen to what cannot be explained easily. Many people override discernment with logic, with emotion, with desire, but those who learn to recognize it often realize something important. Discernment does not arrive with answers, it arrives with signals. This script explores 7 signs that often indicate the presence of discernment, not as a label, not as a gift to boast about, but as a responsibility to handle carefully. One of the earliest signs of discernment is discomfort without explanation. You walk into a situation that looks fine on the surface. Nothing is obviously wrong. No clear red flags. No logical reason to worry. Yet something inside you feels unsettled. It is not fear. It is not anxiety. It is not imagination. It is awareness, arriving before understanding. Discernment often works this way. It alerts the spirit before the mind catches up. This discomfort is subtle. It does not overwhelm you. It simply refuses to disappear. You try to reason it away. You tell yourself you are overthinking. You remind yourself that everything seems normal. But the feeling remains. Scripture often describes this as a lack of peace, not panic, not dread, just peace quietly leaving. This is important. Discernment does not accuse. It does not explain. It does not justify itself. It simply signals that something requires attention. Many people ignore this sign because they trust logic more than inner awareness. But discernment is not opposed to logic. It simply arrives earlier. In the Bible, there are many moments where individuals sensed danger before evidence appeared. Jesus often withdrew from places before conflict erupted. Paul avoided certain paths without knowing exactly why. These were not impulsive decisions. They were responses to inner restraint. Discernment often begins as restraint, a hesitation to move forward, a sense that now is not the time, a feeling that something is misaligned. This is why discernment requires patience. If you rush decisions, you silence it. If you slow down, it becomes clearer. The danger is not that discernment is unclear. The danger is that people talk themselves out of it. They mistake unease for negativity. But discernment is not negative. It is protective. It does not tell you what to think. It tells you to pay attention. And for those who listen, this quiet signal often prevents damage long before it occurs. One of the clearest indicators of discernment is sensitivity to tone. Most people listen to what is being said. Those with discernment pay attention to how it is said. Words can be arranged carefully. They can sound correct. They can even sound kind. But tone reveals alignment. Discernment notices what words try to hide. You may hear someone speak politely, yet something underneath feels inconsistent. The words say one thing, the tone suggests another. This awareness is not suspicion, it is perception. Discernment listens between the lines. It notices tension beneath calm speech. It senses pride behind humility. It detects manipulation beneath concern. This does not mean you assume the worst. It means you remain observant. Jesus often responded not to the words spoken, but to the heart behind them. He answered questions that were never asked aloud, because discernment recognizes intention. Tone carries intention. It reveals whether words are flowing from truth or from performance. This is why people with discernment often feel drained after certain conversations, not because the discussion was difficult, but because the tone required effort to interpret. Discernment works quietly here. It does not accuse the speaker. It does not create conflict. It simply registers that something is not fully aligned. Many people dismiss this sign because it feels intangible. They tell themselves they are being overly sensitive, but sensitivity is not weakness. In Scripture, sensitivity is often linked to wisdom. A hardened heart cannot discern tone. Only a receptive one can. This sign becomes stronger when you stop forcing yourself to ignore it, when you allow yourself to acknowledge what you are sensing without immediately judging it. Discernment does not demand action. Sometimes it only asks you to remain alert, to listen more than you speak, to observe before you trust. Those who learn to respect this sign often avoid confusion later, because tone rarely lies. Words can be rehearsed, tone cannot. One of the more subtle signs of discernment is discomfort around false humility. At first, it can be confusing, because humility is supposed to be a good thing. It sounds gentle, it looks polite, it often appears spiritual. But discernment notices when humility is performed rather than lived. False humility speaks softly, but draws attention to itself. It appears modest, yet quietly seeks recognition. It deflects praise, but remembers every compliment. Those with discernment often feel unsettled around this behavior, not because it is loud or obvious, but because something feels off. True humility does not need to announce itself. It does not explain itself. It does not compete. False humility, however, is strategic. It knows when to step back and when to subtly step forward. Discernment recognizes the difference. In Scripture, Jesus was rarely disturbed by open arrogance. He confronted it directly. What drew his strongest responses was hypocrisy that disguised itself as righteousness. Because false humility misleads others. It creates confusion by appearing safe while being driven by ego. People with discernment often struggle here. They feel tension but hesitate to name it. They worry they are being judgmental. But discernment is not judgment. It is clarity. It does not condemn the person. It simply refuses to be deceived. This sign often appears when someone consistently presents themselves as selfless, yet their actions quietly serve themselves. When they speak about sacrifice but resist inconvenience. When they appear teachable but never change. Discernment senses the gap between appearance and reality. This awareness is not meant to make you suspicious of everyone. It is meant to protect sincerity. True humility feels light. It does not require interpretation. False humility feels heavy. It demands discernment. And those who possess discernment often feel relief when they trust this signal, because it brings alignment back into focus. One of the most reliable indicators of discernment is the presence or absence of peace. This peace is often misunderstood. It is not comfort. It is not excitement. It is not emotional relief. Biblical peace is alignment. It is the quiet assurance that something is in its proper place. When alignment is present, peace remains even in difficulty. When alignment is lost, peace withdraws even when everything looks fine. Those with discernment often recognize this shift immediately. Nothing dramatic happens. No obvious mistake is made, yet something inside changes. Peace does not shatter. It fades. Decisions that once felt clear begin to feel heavy. Conversations that once felt natural begin to feel strained. Opportunities that looked promising begin to feel misaligned. This is discernment speaking. Many people confuse the loss of peace with fear, but fear agitates. Loss of peace restrains. Fear pushes you to react. Discernment slows you down. In Scripture, Peace is often used as confirmation, not as an emotional reward, but as guidance. Let peace rule in your hearts. Rule implies authority. Peace governs decisions when discernment is active. This is why people with discernment are cautious with choices that require them to ignore peace. They may not have a reason, they may not have proof, but they know that forcing alignment always carries a cost. Discernment does not prevent difficulty, it prevents misdirection. Peace can exist in hardship, but it rarely exists in compromise. This is why discernment grows with obedience. Each time peace is honored, sensitivity increases. Each time peace is overridden, discernment dulls. This sign requires honesty, because sometimes peace leaves not because others are wrong, but because we are. Discernment reveals misalignment without accusation. It simply invites correction, and those who learn to respect the movement of peace often find themselves protected from paths that appear right but lead elsewhere. One of the clearest marks of genuine discernment is the ability to sense motives without feeling the need to accuse. This is important because discernment does not seek confrontation, it seeks clarity. Those with discernment often notice intention before action reveals it. They sense when kindness has conditions attached. They feel when generosity is offered with expectation. They recognize when advice is shaped by self-interest rather than care. Yet they do not rush to expose it. Discernment is patient. It understands that motives are complex. Not every misaligned intention is malicious. Sometimes people act from insecurity, from fear, from a need to be seen. Discernment makes room for this understanding. It does not label quickly. It does not react emotionally. Instead, it quietly adjusts distance. This is a key difference between discernment and suspicion. Suspicion looks for evidence to confirm distrust. Discernment observes patterns without emotional attachment. It notices consistency or lack of it. In Scripture, wisdom is often described as slow to speak and quick to listen. This is because discernment does not need to be loud. It does not need to prove itself right. It simply guides behavior. People with discernment often choose silence over explanation, not because they are unsure, but because clarity does not always require disclosure. They may remain kind, but become cautious. They may stay respectful, but stop confiding. This is not withdrawal, it is wisdom. Discernment protects the heart without hardening it. It allows compassion without naivety. This sign becomes stronger as humility grows, because discernment recognizes that motives exist in everyone, including ourselves, and those who possess it are often more focused on staying aligned than on being proven right. One of the most misunderstood aspects of discernment is how often it restrains rather than motivates. Many people expect discernment to push them forward, to urge action, to confirm movement, but in reality, discernment more often says, "Not yet." It places a quiet pause between impulse and action. This restraint is not hesitation, it is awareness. Those with discernment often feel a subtle check inside them. Before speaking, before committing, before reacting, they may sense a pull to slow down, even when momentum feels strong. This is not fear. Fear pressures. Discernment steadies. In Scripture, restraint is frequently portrayed as wisdom. Even fools are thought wise if they keep silent. Discernment does not rush to respond. It understands that timing matters as much as truth. Many people regret actions taken too quickly. Those with discernment often regret what they ignored. This sign can feel frustrating, especially in a world that rewards speed and decisiveness. But discernment values alignment over immediacy. It recognizes that not every open door should be walked through. Sometimes restraint is protection in disguise. Sometimes silence preserves clarity. Those who honor this sign often find that when action is required, it becomes unmistakable. There is no forcing, no confusion, no inner resistance. Discernment does not delay indefinitely. It simply waits until movement aligns with peace. And when that alignment arrives, action flows naturally. One of the most overlooked signs of true discernment is where attention is directed. Those with discernment are not primarily focused on detecting flaws in others. They are acutely aware of their own internal state. They notice when pride rises, when impatience surfaces, when motives become mixed. Discernment turns inward before it looks outward. This is why people with discernment often appear gentle, not because they lack conviction, but because they understand their own capacity to misalign. In Scripture, the most discerning individuals were deeply aware of their dependence on grace. They questioned themselves before questioning others. Discernment creates humility because it reveals complexity. It shows that truth is rarely simple, that intentions are layered, that righteousness requires vigilance. This sign often protects against spiritual arrogance. Those with discernment know how easily awareness can become judgment, so they guard it carefully. They do not feel superior. They feel responsible to stay aligned, responsible to remain teachable, responsible to listen. This is why discernment matures slowly. It grows through self-examination, not through exposure of others. The greatest danger to discernment is certainty without humility, because certainty closes the ear, but discernment keeps it open. Those who recognize this sign often find that clarity increases as ego decreases, and when discernment is fully mature, it does not isolate. It deepens compassion. As discernment deepens, something unexpected often happens. It becomes heavier, not because it is negative, but because awareness carries responsibility. Those who discern often see things they wish they did not have to see. They notice misalignment before others do. They sense shifts before they become visible. They recognize when something is changing long before words confirm it. And this can feel isolating because discernment does not always come with permission to explain. You may see where something is heading, but lack the clarity or the authority to stop it. You may sense distance growing before separation occurs. You may feel restraint while others feel excitement. This is one of the quiet costs of discernment. It often places you slightly out of sync with the pace of the world around you, not faster, often slower. Discernment asks you to wait while others rush, to remain silent while others speak, to trust what you sense, even when you cannot yet prove it. This is why discernment requires emotional maturity. Without maturity, it can turn into frustration. Without humility, it can turn into withdrawal. But when handled correctly, discernment becomes grounding. It teaches you that not everything needs your reaction, that not every misalignment is yours to correct, that sometimes the role of discernment is simply to prepare you, not to intervene. In Scripture, many discerning individuals were not sent to change outcomes. They were sent to remain faithful within them. This is an important distinction. Discernment is not always a call to action. Sometimes it is a call to endurance, to remain aligned while others drift, to stay grounded while others are swayed, to trust that clarity will matter when the moment arrives. And for those who carry discernment, this understanding brings relief because it removes the pressure to control. It allows you to rest in awareness without anxiety, to see clearly without becoming hardened. This is where discernment matures, not when it identifies everything wrong, but when it knows what it is responsible for and what it is not. There is a quiet loneliness that often accompanies discernment, not the loneliness of abandonment, but the loneliness of awareness. You may find yourself standing in rooms where others feel comfortable, yet something in you remains unsettled, not because something is wrong, but because something is unseen. Discernment often places you on the edge of moments, present, but not fully participating. You sense when conversations are shallow, when intentions are mixed, when enthusiasm masks uncertainty, and while others feel energized, you feel cautious. This can create distance, not intentionally, not out of pride, but out of restraint. Those with discernment often learn to carry understanding without immediate companionship, because not everyone is meant to see what you see. At the same time, this is where patience is refined. Discernment teaches you to wait without bitterness, to hold insight without urgency, to trust that timing is as important as truth. Many who walk with discernment mistake this season for delay, but it is not delay, it is preparation. Preparation of character, preparation of response, preparation of endurance, because clarity without patience can become destructive, and awareness without love can become isolating. Discernment shapes both. It teaches you that being early is not the same as being wrong, that seeing ahead does not require moving ahead. Sometimes discernment asks you to remain where you are, even when you already know where things are going. This is not punishment, it is trust. Trust that you can carry insight without needing validation. Trust that understanding does not need immediate agreement. And in this season, discernment quietly strengthens your inner life. You become less reactive, less dependent on approval, less shaken by misunderstanding. You learn to be steady without being distant, present without being entangled. And slowly, this loneliness transforms. It becomes solitude, not emptiness, but space. Space where wisdom settles, where motives clarify, where peace becomes familiar. This is where discernment stops feeling heavy and begins to feel anchored. One of the quieter challenges of discernment is being misunderstood by those around you, not because you are unclear, but because discernment does not always translate well into words. You may withdraw and be seen as distant. You may hesitate and be seen as uncertain. You may refuse and be seen as ungrateful. But the truth is, your restraint is intentional. Discernment often looks like hesitation to those who live by impulse. It looks like passivity to those who equate speed with confidence. It looks like silence to those who fear stillness. And because discernment rarely explains itself, misinterpretation becomes common. Those who discern are often judged for what they do not say, for what they do not pursue, for what they quietly avoid. This can be painful because you are not acting out of fear or apathy. You are acting out of awareness. Yet discernment teaches that not every misunderstanding requires correction. Sometimes clarity must speak through consistency, not defense. Those who walk with discernment learn to let time reveal alignment. They learn that explanation is not always the path to peace, and that being misunderstood does not invalidate wisdom. In Scripture, many who were deeply discerning were also deeply misunderstood, not because they lacked truth, but because truth ahead of its time often feels uncomfortable. Discernment accepts this cost, not with resentment, but with grace. It chooses integrity over recognition, alignment over approval. And over time, this choice strengthens resolve. You become less concerned with how you are perceived and more committed to remaining faithful to what you sense. This is where discernment becomes quiet confidence. Not loud, not defensive, not reactive, simply steady. And those who are meant to understand you eventually will, not because you explained more, but because your discernment proved consistent. Discernment is not meant to make life louder. It is meant to make life clearer. After all the signs, after the restraint, after the weight, the loneliness, and the misunderstandings, discernment leaves you with one quiet gift: steadiness. Not certainty about everything, but peace about enough. Those who walk with discernment learn that clarity does not always arrive as answers. Sometimes it arrives as calm, calm in decisions, calm in distance, calm in waiting. Discernment teaches you that you do not need to react to everything you notice, that awareness does not require control, that seeing clearly does not mean intervening constantly. It invites you to live aligned, even when outcomes remain unknown. This is why discernment is less about prediction and more about posture. A posture of humility, of attentiveness, of trust. Trust that what you sense has purpose, even when it is not yet explained. Trust that restraint is not wasted time. Trust that silence can be obedience. Those who honor discernment do not become passive. They become precise. They move when movement aligns with peace. They speak when words carry weight. They wait when waiting protects the heart. And over time, discernment shapes a life that is less reactive and more rooted, less driven by pressure, more guided by wisdom. If you recognize these patterns in yourself, do not rush to define them. Do not rush to announce them, simply protect them. Discernment grows best in quiet spaces, with patience and with care. Because discernment was never meant to elevate you above others, it was meant to keep you aligned when the path becomes unclear. And that alignment, steady, humble, and unseen, is often the truest sign of wisdom.